Today I have a conversation with Erin Holberg on the topic of eating disorders. Erin battled for years with what is defined as a binge eating disorder and was able to break her unhealthy habits and develop a positive relationship with food. She wants to communicate the message that if you're out there struggling, you're not alone. If she was able to overcome, then so can you. For the first half of the show, we focus on her personal story and testimony. The second half, we start breaking into societal factors and the importance of focusing on being healthy rather than trying to achieve a certain image. Your relationship with food has an immense impact on your life, and Erin's story testifies to that fact. Out of all the mental illnesses, eating disorders have the highest mortality rate, above schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. My hope is to bring awareness to the subject, and I thank Erin for having the courage to share her story. Thanks for tuning in. I have a good relationship with food, but I think it's important to recognize when, even if it's something that you think is good, like over dieting or over exercising, that habit could turn bad real quick.
Absolutely.
And you gotta have a balance.
Absolutely.
Because it can get out of control.
Totally. And I feel like since I don't want to say that we have like a very label forward, it's a very label forward society, but in some ways it is like people like to have a label on something in order to identify it. And because of that, there have, I feel like, been so many new different names for eating disorders and different types of eating disorders that have come up over the past handful of years. Whereas before, when I thought of eating disorders, I thought bulimia, anorexia. That's it, And there are so many different ways to identify eating disorders and so many different types of eating disorders that you might not even really particularly think of it as an eating disorder and more or less disordered eating. I don't know. I feel like there's differences between the way people identify things.
The two that you mentioned were, what was it, anorexia and bulimia?
Yeah.
And then another one that's pretty prominent now, I think they clinically diagnose it, is binge eating. Those are the three main categories.
Totally.
Grant, can you look up real quick the three main categories of eating disorders?
Well, and
then I was doing some research earlier today, and out of neurological or psychological disorders, it's the number one with the highest mortality rate, even above schizophrenia and depression, because they say it's a secondary effect with those two conditions that cause you, for example, to commit suicide.
Right.
But this is one where your actions have a direct physical effect on you that could take your life, with the lack of nutrition, with all these different side effects of whether it's purging or binge eating, or just the body just more looking at yourself in the mirror and thinking that you're overweight when you're really just putting no nutrition in you and you're just shriveling away into nothing.
Totally. Well, and as with I feel like with a lot of low-key medical issues too, is that it's almost down the line, all the stress that you put on yourself, the mental stress, the physical stress of pretty much any type of eating disorder, it could end up taking a toll in some way down the line. What we were talking about yesterday with my gut. It's okay, I live with that every day now. We're, working towards addressing it, but I live with that now, and it's most likely brought up as a direct result of having this eating disorder. So
let's start with that. What was this eating disorder? When did you start developing it? How old were you?
Yeah, so that's kind of maybe a long story, but
let's go back. I want to trace when you first maybe didn't even notice it until after some time, when you're like, holy crap, maybe what I'm doing is not healthy. Or if it was someone on the outside looking in that had to tell you, but just your personal testimony with your eating disorder.
Yeah. So I've always been an anxious kid, or an anxious person in general. Was a very anxious kid and somewhat of an anxious teenager. But I will say that I know that a lot of these issues can stem from family or friendship circles, almost like making comments or about other people, about the person themselves, physically.
So external sources.
Right, totally. And I am very fortunate in that my family there was no pressure physically, performance-wise, no pressure put on me really at all. in high school and grade school, my parents were very cool, very chill. And unfortunately, I was the one that put all the pressure on myself. I was in a really academically challenging friend group in that we all pushed ourselves. I wouldn't necessarily say in an unhealthy way, but there was a lot of academic pressure within my friendship group. And because of that, I put a lot of pressure on myself academically, which then I think stemmed into, I did like tennis in high school. I did other random sports. I did art, obviously, and like was one of the better art students in the school, and which also then caused me to put even more pressure on myself, yada, yada, yada. So I think honestly, a lot of this just stemmed from me being A-type personality and putting that pressure on me from day one. So my family were like, we were huge foodies growing up too. So we went to restaurants all the time. I mean, weekends focused a lot around like meals together, going out to eat. And that was always a really fun, nostalgic thing for me. And I loved it. I never viewed it as bad. It was always like really precious times with my family. Like holidays would come around and, you know, we'd have big family dinners, and even though my family's very small, but we have big family dinners. And, you know, like those were always awesome experiences.
Yeah, as most humans, it's a positive association with food and relationships and gathering.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And so I grew up in that headspace, and my dad would cook on weekends, and there was a lot of positivity surrounding food. And so I'd say nothing really, honestly, aside from like the academic pressures I was putting on myself and maybe occasional social pressures, I never felt any particular way about my body physically, like growing up. I never really looked in the mirror and was like what? Like, I have to change that. It was more or less, I would look in the mirror and I'd feel confident. Like, I'd feel stoked. I had like raging hormonal acne in high school, which was always fun to deal with. But physically, like myself, my body, I never felt like I needed to change anything about it. So I think some of that might have started in sophomore year of college. I think the summer after sophomore year, so circa 2012, I came home for the summer and was, you know, I got a gym membership, I think, for the first time back home. And I was working out that summer and like eating salmon and being like a nutritious person. And I was like, hell yeah, like we're here. Like I'm getting, you know, this is growing in my conscious a little bit, you know, like this is an interesting topic. And I think that's when I first like started planting the little seed of like, I actually find this really fascinating, like nutrition, and maybe I will be interested in working out, you know, some more and whatever. But then junior year, second semester was probably the first time that I ever experienced anything that looked classically like disordered eating, which was interesting because I studied abroad my second semester of junior year and went to Rome. And I feel like a lot of these things, like I kind of mentioned before, like they start in almost like a dark time, or when someone makes a comment, or you're feeling self-conscious about your body for some particular reason, usually an external factor. And I was like in the prime of my life, junior year, second semester, like studying abroad. It was so much fun.
What's not to love?
Yeah, I was having the time of my life, like living the dream, and I started binging. And I don't know if it was like subconsciously I missed home. I mean, I feel like there's a bunch of ways that you could read into it, but honestly, I think it was like a physical and, like you're saying, maybe a neurological response to what was going on around me. And one thing that was extremely lacking when I studied abroad in Rome was, this sounds really silly, but it was breakfast. Like Italians don't really have a breakfast ritual. You know, I feel like Americans, well, that's a lie. They have a breakfast ritual, but it surrounds, I think, like a Danish or a croissant of some sort and a coffee.
Not the same as the American breakfast. Ever since we were little, that's the most important meal of the day.
Totally. Bacon, eggs, toast, get your protein.
Big breakfast.
Yeah. So like I've grown up a huge breakfast kid, and I've always, even throughout college, like I always had to have breakfast in the morning. Like I couldn't just have a cup of coffee and go off to class for the whole day and be totally fine till 5 p.m. It's like I needed to have breakfast, I needed to have lunch, all of the things, right? And so there wasn't really a source of breakfast in Rome. So I had to resort to, I would get tubs of yogurt and honey and like the closest thing to a cracker, sort of, which was like a cookie. Okay. So I'd eat, because I was like, I have to get protein and some carbs, in the morning. So I eat cookies, like these like biscuits of sort with yogurt and honey. And then I'd go off to class and be starving in an hour. Because what am I eating? It's like a little bit of protein, dairy, which is going to most likely convert to sugar, and then sugar, which is going to convert to sugar in the form of honey and cookies and whatnot. So I would have like a crash by 10 a.m., be starving in the middle of like a drawing class or walking around a piazza, like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then we stop for a snack, and it's like just unload or wait till lunch. The easy, accessible food that we had at our fingertips was like they had a vending machine at school, and it was stocked full of delicious but candy. Tons of candy, tons of chocolate, tons of carbs, just, lots and lots and lots of sugar. And so, I dove headfirst right into that, We had a gelato shop right down the street from where we lived, and we would go there almost nightly, and it was so much fun. And there's, pasta is abundant and wine is abundant. And so it's a lot of load on the body sugar-wise, And so I think my like spikes, my highs and lows were pretty significant. And one morning I remember before I was going to class, I was like sitting in the kitchen by myself, and I ate a whole bag of cookies. And I was like, this is weird. Like, I wouldn't do this normally. Why am I eating? I know I shouldn't eat this whole bag, but I'm starving. I have to eat these because I don't know when the next time I'm going to be able to eat is. But the thing was, like, what you kind of mentioned before, the difference I think between an eating disorder and disordered eating, because that's very clearly disordered eating, is that at that time in my life, it wasn't affecting me mentally. It was like, I thought about it. I was like, well, that kind of sucks. I shouldn't really eat that many cookies.
Yeah.
But it didn't get to me. It didn't get to me mentally, I wasn't like,
interesting.
Bad person.
Yeah. It was this initial like change of pace and just lack of resources for like what your normal breakfast was.
Totally.
So it was the yogurt, the honey, the crackers.
Yeah.
And then you're walking around campus, and there weren't other options for like sandwiches. Or I know they eat pretty healthy. People over there are pretty healthy. I imagine, you said the vending machines have all this candy stocked up.
Right.
But you had never been used to like having to really think about it too much.
100%. That's the key. Because this was prior to any sort of meal prep I had ever done for myself.
Got it.
If I was used to meal prepping or cooking for myself in that capacity, I would have been set. Like, I could have made, something to take for that 10 a.m., plummet where I'm freaking starving and everyone's still chilling off of their espresso. It's like I could have packed something to bring, but I wasn't in that mindset back then. I was more concerned about what I was going to wear to class, or like what killer leggings I was going to rock that day.
Or
how ridiculous I could look.
Because you were describing maybe fasting, which wasn't even an option then. And people argue nowadays that it's healthy for some. I know I do it.
Yeah.
And I know a bunch of people that do it, but you were in no position at that point with like how your body was operating previously to be like fasting.
Right.
You were like, I'm too hungry. I can't function.
Totally. And that wasn't even remotely on my radar at the time. That wasn't even remotely
on my radar.
So
how does it really transfer into something like really unhealthy? Let's get to...
Yeah. So that was junior year, second semester. And then I came back to school and finished out senior year. And senior year, my girlfriend at the time was a kinesiology major and introduced me to like way more into the world of like nutrition and working out, weightlifting, all of that kind of stuff that was really new to me. But as soon as I learned more about it, I had a really, really high interest in it. So I was like, damn, like this is sick. Like I want to weightlift. I want to learn more about nutrition. I want to know what's going to best fuel my body. And so I think throughout the course of maybe senior year, I kind of got more into that realm mentally, you know, and just gained a little bit more knowledge on it, and just started reading up more about it, and just it basically just sparked my interest at that time. And I think at that point, like, the seed was sort of planted, and what starts out as a good thing can often end as a great thing. But I think for me, started out as a good thing, ended up as not a good thing, you know. So
let's talk about some of your habits. What were some of your habits?
Totally. So
what went
bad? The first time that it was actually really bad was that summer. So I left school, graduated. That summer I did a seasonal job in Bar Harbor in Maine. And it was kind of my first experience, somewhat first experience. Like, it was my first serving experience, but like longer day restaurant job kind of thing. And for anybody who's worked a restaurant job, it's like, you know, that you don't really get to eat that much during your shifts, and you kind of eat what's available. And so there's not really a steady pattern of like planning for eating that you can do if that's the kind of job that you're working at the time. So I would go in for like late afternoon shifts, and at that point I was still pretty much in this like, you know, nutrition mindset. And I'm like, okay, what am I, you know, what's a good choice to make right now? Like, what should I eat? And I would go to work and eat, like, so they had like a list of foods that we could have as employees that were going to be free, or else you did pay. And one of the options was like a Caesar salad with chicken. So I was like, all right, sweet. This is probably the everything else was like fried. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll have a salad every day. But I would get a salad, no dressing, lemon on the side with like chicken, lettuce. It was like lettuce, chicken, cheese, and a lemon on the plate. And so I would try and work a shift off of that. It's not sustainable. Like for some people it would be, but that wasn't sustainable for me. And so by the end of my shift, I'd be starving and ravenous. And it was probably about the second month of working those kinds of shifts that I would hop off my shift at the end of the night. And if I was working alone and cleaning up, you know, parts of the restaurant, I would go in the kitchen and eat sweets. Like, I would pull the frozen sweets out of the freezer and eat them frozen, and just go ham salad in the kitchen by myself. I'm like, this is my time to shine. I'd go in there and eat it all and feel disgusting, go home, maybe on the way home, stop at a gas station, grab some more stuff, go home, finish it off, go to bed.
Was it more sweets? Because it sounds like from Europe to now your first restaurant job, it's sweets are your crutch.
100%. 100%. And I know that it does manifest differently for some people, but I was raised with a great sweet tooth, and that's definitely how it came out for me.
So if you have this healthy mindset in your training and you're learning more about nutrition,
mm-hmm.
why grab the sweets? Why not grab something that's more like calorie dense, but in a good way, that's in the fridge? I mean, I imagine there's a surplus of so many things at this place. Is it literally just you were so starving that your craving directly
Absolutely.
took you to something sweet?
Your body ends up craving what it knows it shouldn't have. The foods that end up being forbidden in your mind are the ones that you end up craving the most typically. And you go for the thing that's going to give you the biggest punch as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And what does that usually look like? Sugar. So typically people will go for more calorically dense foods, like you're saying. So one thing that I always used to restrict myself from was peanut butter and granola. I could not, like, there was no way I couldn't have a bag of granola in the house because I would eat the whole thing. I couldn't have peanut butter. I couldn't have a taste of peanut butter because I would eat spoonfuls upon spoonfuls. And so those were things that I couldn't have, or I would push aside because I knew my limits were off with those. But anyway, so during this job, it kind of developed more aggressively. And it was that summer that I took to my phone and was like, I feel like something's wrong, you know? I feel like this isn't normal. And I had shades of this from when I was in Rome. And I'm like, what is this pattern? Like, there seems to be this pattern that's arising. And I looked it up and I'm like, I'm not anorexic. I'm not starving myself. You know, it's like in these periods where I was being really healthy, I wasn't seemingly starving myself, you know? It's like I was eating healthfully. So I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I was severely calorically under eating. You know, I'm having a salad with chicken on it. And it's like, I should I was needing most likely like upwards of 2,200 calories a day. And I was probably limiting myself to like 1,600. So
were you physically like shrinking?
No.
Okay, so your body mass, the index was pretty much the same.
Body mass is pretty much the same, yeah. And
so you would starve yourself almost on that really low calorie, healthy but low calorie, not sustainable diet on with what your lifestyle is, and then you just bombard calories at the end of the day.
On OP. Yeah.
Not the healthiest either.
Right.
But that's what was kind of maintaining. So you're binge eating at that point.
100%.
So when you started looking things up, is that what it said?
Exactly. And so I was like, I'm not anorexic. I'm not starving myself. I'm not bulimic. I'm not purging, even though, frankly, I did try a few times. Because like, you know what? This is so uncomfortable. If I could just get it up, that'd be great. Because
you were so full after.
So full and so miserable.
What are you putting? I know you say you're grabbing sweets. Is it literally just like dessert? Like, well, yeah. What kind of stuff are you shoving in?
Yeah. So this restaurant in Maine, one of the things on the menu was whoopie pies.
Whoopie pie.
Do you know what that is?
No.
So it's like, this is a big debate in the Northeast, but it's like 2 cake patties, like 2 circular cake pieces with like whipped cream and lard in the center.
Oh, it sounds so good.
They're bomb. And they're even better frozen. I can attest to that. But I would pull them out of the freezer and eat like 2 or 3. It's disgusting.
Interesting.
Yeah, but you know, at the time it was so satisfying and so good that you lose it. And I just kept, I would eat more, and then I would feel bad about myself. So on my way home from work, I would either like go to the grocery store real quick and grab more shit, or go to a gas station.
When you say shit, good shit or bad shit?
Bad shit.
Like more sweets?
Yeah, or
get specific. Like what kind of stuff?
So I remember one time when I came home from this is down the line, but came home from one of my shifts in Boulder, and I stopped at a gas station and bought like a fat bag of Chex Mix and like an ice cream sandwich, and I can't remember what else was involved in that particular one, but drove it home and ate it in my car outside my house, just like ate the whole thing, whole bag of Chex Mix, like a not a small bag, like a big bag of Chex Mix. Just went ham salad. So
cement rock in your gut.
It's good times. And then the problem too is that I'm getting ahead of myself. So that day that I looked up, what could this be? I saw that binge eating was something on that list. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell this is. Like, no one ever talks about binge eating. Are you joking? Like, it's either anorexia or bulimia. And this was, mind you, also like 2014, before label culture.
I mean, it was still around though. That's not, the health fad has been in effect now.
Yeah.
Really since.
Totally. And another thing I think that's come more into the realm of people's thought is like orthorexia. So I think there was say
it again.
Orthorexia.
What is that?
It's the obsession with healthy eating, the over obsession with healthy eating and healthy foods, working out, that sort of thing. So, I mean, there also is like a whole other side of things when you're overtraining and working out too much, and that's a whole disordered thing in and of itself. But I think binge eating and orthorexia have become more widely known, and something that people are realizing are actually very prevalent amongst people now, along with anorexia and bulimia. But anyway, so that day that I was like, okay, like this is what I have, was that moment where I was like, hell no, like no way there's no way I can have an eating disorder. I'm not someone who would have an eating disorder. Like, I think that's it. On paper, it sounds like it, but there's no way I can't. So I think I sat on that for a minute, and it was kind of like, okay, this is an interesting development in my life that, it threw me for a loop, because like I told you, like I was a foodie. My family loved food. It was always positive, and I'm like, how did this happen?
You didn't like physically look any abnormal, like
I got puffy. I'll say that.
So you were putting on weight at this time?
So by the end of that summer, so like October when I went home, I was definitely heavier than when I had gotten there. But I'm talking maybe like 15 pounds. So
that by itself is not really an eating disorder. So you were most concerned with the pattern of eating.
Totally.
So it was what you were eating and then the amount you were eating at one time.
The amount I was eating and then the feeling. That was the summer that after those binges, those episodes, I finally started feeling like shit about myself. I would get finished with it and I was like, you know, why did you do that? Why did that happen?
So even when you're sitting on it, when you Google and you have this realization that potentially this could be me, you sit on it and you're still continuing that pattern while Absolutely. You're sitting on it? Okay.
Absolutely.
So when was that moment where you're like, okay, something needs to change or I need to go see a doctor or what happened?
Yeah. So this also then began sort of a pattern of me doing seasonal jobs for a summer, coming home for a winter, sort of saving up a little bit of money, going off to another seasonal job. And I did this for a couple years. So when I got back from Maine, I was home for 6 months. I didn't have much to do. So I worked out and ate really healthfully and lost that weight and got to this place where I was like, I feel good again. Like I wasn't binging. There was none of that. It was like I was focused on what I was doing and I didn't feel, you know, I felt solid. And then I went to Ireland for a summer. And I remember the day I left, this is like, it's so tragic thinking about it now, but I remember the day I left being panicked that I would go and these patterns would start happening again out of my control. And then as soon as they would start, I'd be afraid that there would be no way to stop them. And so I left for Ireland and lo and behold, a few months in, I started developing the patterns again and they kicked in really hard. It was also the summer, this is like side information, but I think it's relevant. I went off of my hormonal birth control. And so I was like hitting these massive highs and massive, massive, massive lows of like sitting in my room crying in like this tiny little adorable Irish house, like just sitting in my room, just bawling my eyes out, like not sure what was going on. And then binging, going off and doing something. I was working a restaurant job there as well. And I think that one was even a step further into the unhealthy realm because it was a bartending job for the first part of my time there. And we would be up till 2, 3, get home at 2 or 3. And I wasn't really eating that much during my time, like during my shift, and then get home, go on my way, like, be on my way there and get home and just be like, I'm so hungry, I can't function. And
then stuff your face full of unhealthy stuff.
Yeah. And go to bed. That like Alpen muesli shit that's just like dry ass oats and like date pieces and like almond slivers. That was my jam. I would come home and like eat almost a full bag of fucking Alpen muesli and be like, all right, I feel great, even though I felt like shit. It was the weirdest. It's always the weirdest things I find that I was craving and also at the same time restricting myself from. And it was always the stuff that I was like, you can't have that, was the stuff that I was like, okay, well, now that I am in this pattern of binging, I'm going in. Like, I'm just going to have all this stuff that I told myself I couldn't have.
Interesting. So when you're at home, though, is it because you have, like, family preparing meals and on, like, a regimen of normal, like, meals and that habit? Why is it normal when you're at home? Or is it just pure mindset? Like, I'm here, I'm going to be healthy, have these healthy patterns, and then I'm just trying to wrap my head around what trick. So when you go overseas, and I know you said you were off some medication that maybe hormonally changed you,
totally.
And now you're having psychological ups and downs, and then you want to go get comforted with binging, or you want to go get comforted with food. Right. You're working, starve yourself. But I mean, people get hungry. People like starve themselves in quotes. I mean, when I remember when my mom says, well, I'll tell her like, hey, I'm starving. Yeah. It's like, okay, are you really starving or are you just hungry? It's like, no, you're just hungry. But does it get worse than that even? So because you mentioned something that's like almonds and granola. Right. In my head, I'm like, wait, this seems kind of healthy.
Right.
And I personally am one that fasts now too, and will get myself to a pretty hungry state. Mm-hmm. And then I will eat kind of like an abnormal amount of food sometimes.
Right.
And I mean, shit, because you're saying all this, I'm like, maybe I'm a binge eater because, but no, that I've heard also though, that like our ancestors, not saying that natural is better because I'm not a believer in just what our ancestors did
right.
is better than like running some sort of test now, or any sort of scientific method where I like to measure outcomes.
Right.
You know, you measure the biological components. So people would argue, though, humans didn't always have this abundance of food, you know, so you're going to get pretty hungry. And then when there's a kill or when you steal someone else's food and you have this abundance in your little tribe or community or whatever, that's when you just go ham and you stuff yourself.
Right.
Because you don't know when that next meal is going to be.
Totally.
I don't know how applicable that is directly to with what like you were dealing with. Is it like stress that's causing you to eat? Because you were like scared going into Ireland, like, holy crap, are these patterns going to pick up again?
You're gonna come back.
Why not just like, no, I'm going to just continue what I was just doing at home. I was so healthy.
Right. No, it's exactly what you just mentioned. And when I finally took the steps to help myself, one of the first things that I learned was I was putting myself literally in starvation mode. I mean, I was active. I've always been active, but I was an active person there as well. And I was probably eating upwards of maybe like 1,600 calories a day. Whereas if I'm going to be going to doing a full shift, maybe doing some sort of a workout before, I mean, I didn't have a car, so I was walking everywhere, you know, and that like will take a caloric toll. I probably should have been eating like 22
at
to
least
2,400 calories a day. And so
now you're in a deficit. Sorry to cut you off, but you're in a deficit now.
Totally.
So you weren't putting on weight for this go around.
Well, so when I was home before I left, I was eating with my family. So like those family meals, like you mentioned, but I was also cooking for myself. And if my mom made chicken, potatoes, and green beans, I would eat the chicken and the green beans, but not the potatoes. I got into this weird thing a few times being home where I was like, I can't do carbs. And you get, it's fucked up because you get yourself into this headspace where it's like, you look down on other people and it's like a challenge with yourself. I was challenging myself. And I think this is once again, that pressure that I put on myself. Can I do it? Can I do it? Can I do it better than I did it last time? And it's like, you know, you look down on those people that are eating carbs. It's like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need that. I'm good, you know? And that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so I was probably more or less in a deficit the whole time I was home. And then I get to Ireland, and the same thing happened when I got to Boulder again, because I came home from Ireland and I had gained, probably in Ireland, I gained probably 25 pounds.
Okay, this is where I'm confused, because you were just saying you were in a deficit at Ireland. So how did you put on weight?
I just binged more than I binged more days. Towards the end of it, I was probably binging every other day or so. And
so your binging was making up for the...
Totally.
Okay, so when you stated that you were only consuming, what was it, 1,600, but you needed 24. So you were eating above 22 to 24. It was just binging.
At the end of my time there. Yeah, exactly. So when I got there for the first few months, I was probably eating 1,600 to 1,800 calories a day. And I'm purely just talking calorically, like, and then towards the end of it, probably about halfway through, when these binges kicked in full force, and when that would happen, it would be an almost every day, maybe an every other day kind of thing. I would probably be eating 4,000 calories a day.
Got it.
But between like normal eating and then binging at night, or sometimes I would binge before work and then just be like, fuck it, come home and binge again. So some days it would be twice in the same day. Most times it was once a day.
And how long were you there?
6 months again.
6 months. So you said you put on 20-ish pounds in 6 months, and you returned to Boulder?
Came home to Pennsylvania.
Okay, back to Pennsylvania.
Did another 6 months of the exact same crap where I was limiting myself, thinking I was better than hot shit, and, you know, like, just I'm not eating carbs. And then just doing my thing. And then went to Boulder. And when I got to Boulder, I also think I should mention that when I would go home and do these 6 month stints back home, I think I was further digging myself this hole of like, every time I'd go home, I would almost become like my own personal weight loss project, where I'd go home and I'd be like, all right, let's come up with a new plan, new nutrition schedule, new meal, whatever. And I'd always get to that point where I'd kick it off and, I'd be back to my normal self, my restricted self. I feel like that point in my life, I had my restricted self and I had my binge eating self, and there was no way to link the two and no way to like find the happy medium. It was one or the other.
Got it.
So then 6 months home, did the whole thing, went to Boulder, and once again, ridiculously at the time I didn't really think about it, but I was ridiculously underfeeding, like by it's even hard to comprehend. Like,
let's put a measure in terms of weight over time.
I didn't. So that's the other curious thing. I wasn't particularly losing weight during. So when I moved to Boulder, it was in March, and I did a summer job, doing like the outdoor.
What year is this?
2016.
16.
Yeah. So I did an outdoor kids camp instructor job, and I would bring for lunch, like, counted number of crackers. So like 10 crackers, a tiny little portion of lettuce, maybe some chicken, and like a piece of fruit.
Interesting. So you were counting, but it wasn't based off of meeting like a certain calorie count. It was just like 10 crackers, not the fact that I need, let's say, like 100 grams of carbs.
Right.
Okay.
However, so while I was working this camp, I met a really good friend at the time, and she was in her past life in the bodybuilding circuit. And so I bonded with her because I still had this avid interest in nutrition and weightlifting and working out and all this kind of stuff that like I was slowly ill preparing my body for because I wasn't eating properly. But I asked her for help. I was like, can you write me a plan? Because at that time I was also pretty interested in getting shredded. I wanted to get like crazy fit, like muscular and lean, and which is unfortunately something you can't do when you're under eating because your body holds on to the fat storage, and it's not going to want to release that if you're not taking care of yourself properly. And I 100% was not. So she wrote me a plan. And that actually did involve some sort of counting, like half cup of this, half cup of that, like X number of calories of this, X number of calories of that. And from that whole experience, I am very confident in saying that if you are not going for competitive bodybuilding, or if you're not trying to lose weight for some sort of health-related mission, I don't think anybody should measure,
like counts,
like no
calories.
no measuring. I feel like that puts you in such a non-productive headspace and an unhealthy headspace. And for some people, I mean, I respect the people that can do that and not let it go to their head.
But it did for you. It put you in
totally.
Unhealthy.
And more times than not, like I've seen, I feel like I have friends that have tried something similar and end up in a very negative headspace as well. And that kills me because it sucks. Like it really, really, really sucks. But anyway, I got back into that whole thing, the bad mental headspace after this summer of under eating. And that's when it basically kicked off into a full year. I mean, there was no break because I didn't go home. I stayed in Boulder, and it was a full year of just like on and off binging. And I kept a little, this is actually probably like all new information for most of my friends and family. Like, I don't think I've ever told anybody this much detail besides you. But I kept a little, almost like a little calendar, pocket calendar that I would write on the days like that I binged. I would put a B or circle the days, slash the days. Like, if I did a partial binge where I didn't eat to feel like super uncomfortable, but I definitely overate, I would put like a lowercase b. And like all this bullshit that like it was the way my brain was working at that time. And it also, as I was saying, like with any eating disorder, every time I would do it, I would feel like trash about myself. And so this year came and days were passing, and I would have times where I'd be like, I went a week without binging. It's gone. Like I got it, I'm not doing this anymore. And then it would come back with a vengeance. And I started feeling like really, really fucking lost. Just, I don't know how I'm going to break this. What am I doing? And I finished reading, do you know the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark
I've seen the cover, I think, like shared on social media, but I've never read it.
It's a super interesting book. And like, I read it so this would have been April of 2017 when I was in Boulder. And I remember I got to like the last chapter, and it's all about how like you're going to die someday. And like, this is, you know, what the fuck are you doing? Like, everyone's going to go.
Like caring so much.
Yeah. And I was like,
don't take shit so seriously.
Totally. And I had this breakthrough where I laid on my bed and sobbed, just like, what have I been doing to myself? What is this pattern, and how am I going to get free of it? Because I need to get free of it. And I think I went through maybe a couple more months of it on and off. And then that September of 2017, I hit a wall where I decided that this was going to be my last day. And that unfortunately is such a slippery slope, because with binge eating, you think that tomorrow I'm good. I'm going to start over. Tomorrow's going to be a different day. And you hit that day head on, you feel great, and then it comes back. And so you just end up in this horrible, horrible, horrible spiral of feeling positive and then just getting your face planted in the dirt.
Seek clinical help?
And that September was when I hit the wall, and I was like, you know, I can't keep doing this. And by the grace of actually social media, I honestly, I don't even know how I found this account, but I found this account called, it was Beating Binge Eating, as simple as it sounds.
Oh, wow.
And this chick, Brittany Brown, Brittany Brown, saved my life, had a program that is like this Beating Binge Eating blueprint. And so it was a financial investment in myself, but I mean, there were therapists in Boulder. There was actually an eating disorder, I don't say clinic, but specific eating disorder therapists in Boulder, that I was like, I don't even particularly know if I want to go see a therapist. I was like, I don't know
if it's bad enough, or.
Well, I've had therapists for certain things in the past, and I was never like, hell yeah, this made a difference, you know?
Got it.
And not like therapy is fucking great for.
It just didn't work for you, so you didn't want to waste time on trying to solve this problem with
that. Totally. And I, you know, I was like, I don't know what to do at this point. I'm so lost. I feel so out in left field that it was just like, you know what? Try something really crazy. Like, try this Instagram program that I'm like, this is, you know, who the fuck knows?
And it worked, huh?
So I put my money into it, and it was like an 8-week sort of course that she goes through the process of explaining, first and foremost, what your brain is doing. So she hits you with the brain science, and then gets into like the self-love, which I chronically have issues connecting with that kind of talk about, like, you know, sit down and hold your hand and, you know, like look in the mirror and say, you're beautiful. You know,
it's easy to be critical on yourself.
Totally. And I think that works for so many people. And I think if I sat down and really, really tried, I could make it work. But
real quick, what were some of the brain things that she was describing?
Yeah. So this is what actually blew my mind. And I am incredibly fortunate that it really took learning a few things about my brain to do a complete 180 in my behaviors and patterns. So basically what she explained was what you and I just talked about.
What was her name again? Sorry.
Brittany Brown.
Brittany Brown. Okay. Just to shout her out for her work.
Yeah, totally. So it was like when you're in a caloric deficit, for some people, when you're severely under eating, which for myself, when you're severely under eating, your brain goes into starvation mode. So this is 100% a primal instinct. Your brain goes into starvation mode. And so it's constantly preparing for the next like winter, the next fast, the next lack of food intake. So it holds on to all the calories as much as it can. As soon as it sees an opportunity to take in calories, it pushes you to take in as many calories as you possibly can. So that's like 100% fueling the binge. It's like, you know, I'm going to go home and starve myself for the next 12 hours. So since I know that that's going to happen, I need to go and eat 5,000 calories to make up for it. So it's like this constant, it's this circle, this spiral, like I'm starving myself. So I need to eat as much as possible in order to retain all of that, you know, all the calories that I can. And it was as simple as like this little line about try eating more. Try eating more. Try eating more. Stop demonizing foods. Stop labeling as bad and good. No food is inherently bad. We make it bad in society. You know, certainly some foods are going to be more nutritionally positive than others and more nourishing and more nutrient dense than others. No food is bad, and you're not a bad person for eating these bad foods, you know? So it was like these two little pieces of information, one of them being that I was putting myself in starvation mode, and number two, that like foods are not inherently bad. Those two pieces of like really seemingly basic information are what totally turned it around for me. The next day I started eating more, more healthier, well, not healthier, but the same foods that I had been eating during my restrictive phase, but more of them. I wasn't trying to think about calories. I wasn't counting anything. I was just eating to feel full. And when I felt full, I would stop. And I swear it was as simple as that. And I don't want to say it wasn't an immediate transition, because I kind of struggle with using the words like recovery to describe eating disorder, transitioning out of an eating disorder, because I don't necessarily see it as like a damaged thing. And I don't think there's a black and white here, because as you know, like the line these days is like no progress is linear. That's 100% true. Because I mean, sure, I started this program and I, might have binged a day or two here and there. But it was just to me, after spending 3 years of this fucking awful roller coaster that I didn't think I could ever get out of, there were days where I was like, I'm never gonna be done with this. This is my life now. And there were so many people on this program too, because the cool thing about it as well is that you are going through it with a certain number of people, and there's like a Facebook group for people that are in the program at the same time as you, so you can connect with those people, which is also hugely important.
Yeah, the community.
100%. Knowing that someone else is going through the same thing as you is incredibly powerful. And so that, like, hearing these people's experiences and knowing that some people have been in this game for like 15 years, they're trying to dig themselves out of a 15-year deep hole. Like, I felt incredibly fortunate that I had only experienced about 3 years of this. And for me, the transition out of it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. But once again, everybody's situation is different. And I think I'm extremely lucky that that's how it played out for me.
That's incredible, because I think it's also important to note too, just the difference in, like you said, the stereotypical person would think, oh, like if you're not throwing up or if you don't look emaciated,
totally,
then you don't have a eating disorder. You're fine.
Totally.
It was your relationship with food, for one, and then also the physical effects when you would gorge, and then you feel so awful, bloated and just totally out of it. Absolutely. Did it make you like sleepy and stuff too? After you would stuff yourself? It
would pretty much be at night. So if anything, I would just get a wretched stomach ache and then go to bed. And then, I'd wake up feeling like a hangover, but a different kind. It was like a stomach hangover. Feel disgusting. And then once again, like that constant reminder that your gut is so present and like, hey, you did that last night, like it continued to fuel the cycle. And one thing that you just mentioned too is that it was really interesting when I told my parents about that this had been going on for almost 3 years. And I don't think I even really told them until I had started, getting help for myself. My mom in particular was just like baffled, she's like, I had no idea there was a problem. And that's another thing, is that people hide these things so much from friends, from family. I mean, I would do this in the black of night in the kitchen, and my roommates are asleep upstairs, and it's like I'm just like eating pancake mix, just like and so you hide these behaviors so much from other people, because first of all, there's shame. Second of all, you feel bad about how they're going to perceive you, but how you are portraying yourself, and then you also just feel like shit because you just ate 70 donuts. Like, it's just it's crazy. It's crazy what horrible mental space that puts you in.
I can't imagine, because how has your relationship been with food since then? Have you been able to stick with it? Any like relapses or anything?
you know what? Knock on wood. I haven't binged in, like, this was what's 2017, probably since like late 2017, early 2018.
Wow,
like,
good for you.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? Did you see any like physical changes, mental changes? How long after the program when you started eating regularly and normal amounts of food and just kind of eating till you're full?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one thing that's I think really hard for a lot of people, because we become so disconnected from the actual act of eating a meal. I mean, a lot of people eat in front of the TV. A lot of people eat with their phones. A lot of people eat, you know, like there's in a on a day-to-day basis, you know, like regular meals that you don't really think about, like, oh, I have to eat lunch now. Oh God, you know, like you're on your phone scrolling or something, you know, there's a lot of removal from a meal. And I think a lot of people end up losing those cues for, like, all right, I'm full, you know, I don't need to eat anymore. Or I probably should eat some more. I'm not really full yet, so I should have another snack or something, you know? And that, I think, is one of the hardest things to kind of, like, the hardest place to come to afterwards, is because, I mean, I've been ignoring my body's hunger and fullness cues for years. You know, I was starving, but I wasn't eating. And then I was so full, but I was pushing myself to eat more, you know?
This is amazing to me because it wasn't an external factor. It was literally you just challenging yourself. Because so many people, I mean, whether you're starving yourself or overeating or binging, it's like, I don't want people to see me doing the act of, like, stuffing my face, or you're trying to look like girls in the magazines or on social media and whatnot.
Right.
But it was just a challenge. It was just a pattern.
Yeah.
Like, internally.
It was, I think it was like an interest and a challenge that turned into a bad mental space.
Wow.
Because also, so something really interesting, during that program, she cited a study that, two groups of people were taken, and one was given their recommended daily dose of calories, and the other was given 50% of the recommended daily dose of calories. And this group is chilling, you know, eating their food, living their lives, not thinking about it, as most of us are able to do, thankfully. And then this 50%, this group of people that was at 50% of their daily calories, every single one of them started developing these, like, super bizarre food habits. They would hoard spices in the cafeteria where they were eating to make their food more delicious. Most of them got, like, a newfound interest in becoming a chef or cooking. Some of them, they were saying, some people would go out onto the streets and, like, go to a donut store, buy donuts, and give people on the sidewalk donuts to eat so they could watch people eat the food and just be like,
Whoa.
Yeah, just like seeing other people have the pleasure of eating that food that they're not allowed to eat. It's so fucked up. It's so weird what the brain does, you know?
Yeah, there's so many different like athletes and fitness phenoms that are running through my head right now, because it's making me question a little bit my eating habits, just based on your experience and knowing that there is such a thing like binge eating. Because even earlier, what was it? You said something about, it reminded me of calorie loading, because that's a thing in the fitness industry to get more cut and speeding up your metabolism. Is like, if you have a really, not too restrictive, but let's say you're in a caloric deficit of 300 calories per day for 5 days, because you're on, like, a cutting regime. Then one day you want to calorie load. You want to spike the hell out of your metabolism,
like,
get all your calories.
day.
Yeah, your cheat day, exactly. But they argue that, like, the biological reason for that is because you're actually going to shed more weight following that, because your body goes into a quick, like, surplus mode, or at least from my understanding. Or even when you bring up the counting, I've personally never counted calories.
Right.
I eat most of the time till I'm full, or if I'm honestly stuffing myself, if I know I'm going to have, like, a really high output day with, let's say, 2 days of training.
Sure.
But I think it's definitely a case-by-case basis, too, just on how your body's reacting. And not only how your body's reacting in terms of putting on weight or losing weight, but just your relationship with the food. But then also, after hearing your story, on the flip side, you have, we live in the country that has the highest obesity rate. So I totally understand the merit of her program saying like, food's okay. Don't get mad at yourself. People take that to the extreme on the other side. It's like, oh, I can eat this cheeseburger. I'm at McDonald's every day. Right. I'm eating donuts.
Right.
And they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't feel bad. It's like, no. There's certain things you should be putting in your body.
Right.
And I love food, just like your family, like most people out there. You have a relationship with food, with gathering, and it's always been that way. This culture of just gathering around the campfire and eating, enjoying this meal.
Totally.
But I think it's still important to have some sort of regimen that doesn't put on excess body fat over the course of time. So finding that balance to where you're not, you don't want to be starving yourself and then trying to make up for calories, starving yourself and then trying to make up, but just try to eat as like steady and as healthily rather, just so you don't put on that freshman like 15 when you go to college. Or it's just such a standard thing in our society to like, oh, you see this person in high school and then you look at their picture 10 years later and then 10 years later and 10 years later. And it's just this exponential rate of accepted body weight.
Totally.
And I think it's important too that people, they're not too harsh on themselves in solving a weight gain problem.
Right.
Because you have people that get on these fad diets and they compare themselves and it develops an unhealthy relationship with food. I've seen it
can't do anything that's not sustainable.
Exactly. That's why I don't like diet or all these short-term phrases. Like by definition, I think just in any longevity, you have to just try to understand the science enough, realize that the foods that taste super, super good oftentimes aren't the most healthy. It's not going to be sustainable. If you are going to eat them, limit the amount.
Right.
And there's just diet and eating disorder. There's so many different ways you can cut it and look at it. And my story coming from being like an overweight kid, I've mentioned it here a couple times just with, on my dad's side, it was very like gluttonous, like being rewarded for food. Like I would have a good football game and be rewarded with the whole pizza. Right. So I literally remember being on the line like a defensive lineman, just, oh, I'm going to kill this guy because I want to have a good game so I can get like 2 double-doubles at In-N-Out or a whole pizza.
Yeah.
Because my dad wanted me to be this big football player.
Sure.
And then on my mom's side, it was always family gatherings, this wonderful culture around food. But the fact of the matter is the type of food we were eating was unhealthy and the quantities were too much.
Right.
And you've seen photos of me when I was younger. And I mean, I was a butterball. I was huge. And it wasn't until high school where like through puberty, I lost a little bit of the weight and then just being active in sports, losing some of the weight. But then after high school in a relationship, I put on quite a bit of weight. I think at one point, let's say 180 it was almost around like 40 pounds.
Okay.
And I remember just, I looked down one day and I was like, what the hell happened?
Right.
And that like for you triggered my curiosity into really honing in on nutrition and fitness. And now, because just after hearing your story, I'm trying to reflect on how I was able to develop healthy habits, because I never got into a space, or at least I don't think. I mean, I've never had a bad relationship. It's just not being able to hide from the fact of, like, I know based on testing what my resting caloric like burn is. What does that be? There's an acronym for it, like your resting burn. Yeah. So I think a couple of years ago it was, and that's just for everyone. You understand your resting burn if you're operating at like a minimal capacity.
RMR, resting metabolic rate.
RMR, yeah, resting metabolic rate, which means like if you are just using your brain, let's say sitting at a desk, sleeping, not exerting yourself too much, you'll be at a certain level. So that's when I would argue, if you want to start measuring foods, make sure to like nip it in the butt if you start really developing an unhealthy relationship with that process. But calories in, calories out, I believe in that. That's a fact.
Absolutely. And I didn't really take that into consideration also when I was severely under eating. If I had, honestly, I think maybe I possibly could have stayed, not that this is a good thing, but might have hovered in like the orthorexia realm. Because I didn't realize at the time, I swear, I didn't realize that like, if I'm going to go and burn 600 calories doing a workout, I need to compensate for those 600 calories.
On top of
my resting. If my resting is 1400 and I go and burn, 600 calories plus in a day,
you need to make up. Yeah.
Totally. So it's like, I'm still eating this 1400 calories over here in the corner. Like, I'm good for the day. It's like, no, that's not how it works, you know? So I didn't particularly realize that. And so I think my own personal lack of knowledge and, my measurements were off.
Yeah.
So
there's so many ways to cut it, because you have eating disorders, which is usually, whether it's binge eating or bulimia and stuff, it's associated with that lack of food, being super skinny, making yourself throw up. But on the flip side, there's so many obese people too. It's another eating disorder, whether it's binge eating or just not being knowledgeable enough, not having access to foods. Or people love to say like, oh, I'm at work all day, I get home and I don't want to exercise, I just want to shove food down your face. And it's not to say that it takes a lot of work to develop a healthy relationship with your food and realize that you can't throw a pizza down every day.
Right.
But you can maybe have a couple slices once a week.
Right.
Depending on your lifestyle, and just realizing that you can enjoy those super fatty, like delicious, like healthy foods and still live a normal life and not feel bad about it.
Absolutely.
But you can't hide from the fact, and you got to realize that you can't do it all the time.
It's the whole platitude of everything in moderation.
Moderation.
Everything in moderation.
And balance.
Everything in moderation. And like, I think what you're saying is super true and very important. And it reminds me of something I heard the other day. I was listening to another podcast, and the guest was saying, she brought up the whole thing about how no foods are inherently bad, talking about eating disorders. Yeah. And I do think it's true, because something to keep in mind, because I'm 100% not the kind of person who has, come from an eating disorder background and is now like, everyone's going to get an eating disorder. I know that that's not true. And I'm thankful that that's not true, but I think a lot of people do low key label things as bad and good and limit themselves from these like bad foods in a way that's not always healthy, because then, so this guest was saying that, like no foods are inherently bad. And the host challenged her and was like, well, there are kind of bad foods, and she's like, but those foods that you're referring to, they're not really food. Like this bag of Chex Mix that I ate in my car alone in the pitch black of night was like, it's not really food, It's like, there's no nutrient density to that food. And without a doubt, there are foods that are more nutrient dense than others. And so I think that people end up translating this good and bad into those end up having a negative association in the brain, where it's like, we could view it as these less nutrient dense foods, less nutritious versus more nutritious. And it's like, day in and day out, when you want to take care of your body, do you think it's a good idea to eat all of these, less than nutritious kinds of foods? So, I mean, I think that there's always a way to spin it. And I think for people that are stuck in this good and bad, like, I have to fear donuts because if I buy a box, I'll eat them all, because I know they're bad for me. And it's like, they're less nutritious. They're not bad, Yeah.
The good and bad, just those terms in general can't.
So unhealthy for the brain.
Yeah. And the food doesn't have a mind of its own, whether it's unhealthy, like we created that Chex Mix or that McDonald's cheeseburger. Mm-hmm. And I know you said earlier that or at least in the midst of your eating disorder, it was like you didn't want to judge other people, or you were like, oh, I'm better than you because I'm eating X. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be too critical on people, and I don't agree with that completely, but I do get disappointed when I see people that are massively obese, because I want, like, for those of you that know me, like I love people, like I care about people deeply. And when I see someone slowly killing themselves, I'm like, why? Like, what are you doing? Like, I've spoken to you before. You literally are an intelligent person.
Right.
You know, you could do 2 + 2 = 4. Like you are an intelligent person.
Right.
But you can't break the addiction, or you can't choose to make better choices, because that's really what it is. I like to think of it as a compilation of choices. It's like you make so many choices with food. That's something you do multiple times a day.
Right.
And you have all these options laid out in front of you.
Right.
And you can't hide from the fact that some things are good and some things are bad. And I get there's addiction and you got food as crutches, or if you're in a lower income area and there's a big argument there that there's not healthy like grocery stores around for you to have.
And affordable.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't have the resources to eat, or you don't have the knowledge.
Right.
You know, McDonald's is stacked in low income areas, and you best believe there's business development experts and marketers that are capitalizing on these lower income communities.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And there's just so many different angles with nutrition, food, resources, pricing.
Right.
But truly, if you spend the time and effort in reading a little bit, watch some videos, try to analyze your food groups a little differently to be like, where are my like vegetable sources, my healthy ones? Where are there healthy oils and unhealthy ones? Where are there different sources of protein? Some proteins have more fats than others. There's different sources of grain.
Right.
Are the grains super processed? Do you want to do organic? There's all these different things. I want to be a part of a country. I love our country so much. I want there to be healthier people inside that I can like stand beside as my fellow citizens. And I think it'll transcend too into better mental health. Like a lot of people don't make the connection like, oh, you feel like shit? You don't have a lot of energy?
Totally.
What are you putting in your body?
Absolutely.
Maybe start with that. And I look out at other nations, a lot of like European nations, for example, or even if you look at indigenous tribes in certain areas, your body with certain inputs is supposed to produce just like a natural human look.
That's exactly it. And that's something too that I think a lot of people push in these directions of like diets or, you know, like certain, because the body wants to be at homeostasis.
Exactly.
The body wants to be in a good, chill, healthy place, because then that's the best way it can take care of itself. And that happens naturally. But so many people ignore these cues to keep themselves in that place. And sure, there are going to be a million different factors. You know, if you have some underlying health condition that's going to pull you out of homeostasis, it's like, okay, that's a completely different story. But for a lot of us, it's like, you know, the body wants to exist in that place naturally. And we ignore a lot of that. A lot of people ignore those signs and those cues that the body's trying to give you, normally to exist in that space. And I 100% hear like everything that you're saying about the more like obese communities and different, you know, families and whatnot. And I think that there are so many different factors that can affect that. Basically, I mean, the kind of stuff that you said too, it's like, there's going to be issues with income. There's going to be issues with time management. There's going to be issues with resources, you know? And honestly, I think a lot of people, like you're saying, I mean, people don't care. Some people don't care. There's so much, I find that a lot of that is due to the fact of how people grew up, you know? So it's like, they don't really know any better, and it's not in their nature, genetically, I would say maybe. Not that they can't change that, but you know, it's not in their nature to seek out to find a different option. You know, it's like, this is how their bodies are. This is how their, you know, their direct families' bodies were as well. And it's kind of just going to continue with that pattern going forward. So they pass it on to their kids, and then their kids don't know any better. So, I mean, like I said, there's always a way to get yourself out of that, with knowledge, with hopefully better resources, you know, like not such crazy expensive options. And I also think it's tragic too that what you pointed out, like we as Americans, a lot of us don't have these really beautiful, I want to even like romanticize relationships with food that like a lot of people in like European countries do and stuff. I mean, you turn on like an episode of Chef's Table and it's like all these Europeans are like killing it with their food and they're just like out in the fields just like massaging the olives and they're like, this is what my grandfather did. And it's like, that's so fucking cool. And we don't really have a lot of that history just based on how our country was formed and our melting pot of foods in and of it, you know, in and of itself. We don't really have, aside from like the American burger, you know, like what other.
That's true. But that's what I love about America though. It's like you said, it's the melting pot of foods to where
melting pot.
You can, I mean, God, like refried beans, the unhealthy Mexican food, like full of lard. It's so good. I love cheeseburgers. I love the pizza. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not like a food Nazi. I just like, I mean, people love throwing around the word balance, but it truly is like figure out what works for you. Right. Realize that based on your genetics, based on your height, based on your sex sometimes. Mm-hmm. You based on your output, you're going to have different levels of how much pizza can you enjoy. Right. If you like pizza, maybe go on a couple more runs every week, and then you can enjoy that. Just figure out whatever your balance is.
For sure. I think that's so hard for some people. Yeah. You know?
And that's what I was going to say is I know I'm biased and I'm pulling from my personal story, but the fact of the matter is I want to give people hope and let you know that I literally did it. I grew up eating very unhealthy Southern foods on my mom's side and eating far too much. And it was, the outcome was in photographs. It was a reflection on how long I could run, how well I could do at sports. Right. And it all stemmed from what I was putting in my mouth on a consistent basis. Right. And as soon as you accept that fact and then add some knowledge in there, figure out how to cook, utilize your resources, do everything you can, then you could be like, okay, you put in those inputs, I promise you will get certain outputs. But that's just me. I understand people, obviously you have the freedom to make any choices you want. And I love all people. I just want people to be healthy and care about themselves. Totally. I love people. I want people to be healthy. That's it.
But you just brought up a really, really, really good and also really important point too, is that so while this might not have been your only motivational factor, is that you wanted to push yourself fitness wise, you know, you wanted to push yourself to be able to I can't speak exactly for what, you know, what your motives were behind there, but like run a faster mile, do more deadlifts, you know, like there was something behind it for you. And I think that's hard for a lot of people, especially those that aren't particularly athletically inclined, you know, how do you go from sitting or, you know, for them mentally, like thinking about like, how am I going to go from sitting on the couch every day after work and not working out to working out every day? It's like starting that pattern is really important, and it's easier to get into than you would think it is. But a lot of people I don't think have a motivational goal to go from fitness related, because I think that like you imagine the people that had a goal, like I want to run a 5K in 4 months, and they go from sitting on the couch to running a 5K in 4 months because, you know, they have a plan, they have an intention, they have something that's pushing them forward. And I think that is also really hard for people to achieve and attain as well, because I think a lot of people focus fully on what they look like, and that becomes their motivational factor in the gym. You know, it's like, I don't like the way my stomach looks, I need to go to the gym. It's like, okay, maybe I want to be able to hike a mountain next month, and that's why I'm going to go to the gym. You know, like there's different motivational factors, and I think it's probably hard for some people who don't have those fitness goals to pick themselves up by the bootstraps and go out and do it, you know?
That makes sense.
I mean,
even on top of that, real quick, if you're not happy with your stomach, what I would argue is if you perform certain things with diet and exercise, and everyone's genetics are differently, you're going to have some people that have super shredded abs or even abs. some people that could put on more muscle mass. If you accept the fact that you're never going to look exactly like anyone else, or the Instagram models, or most likely the Instagram models are the people in magazines. Anyway. Yeah, then just if you eat healthy and exercise, those things will come just by virtue of taking care of yourself.
Totally.
So the relationship I would advise is not like, oh, I'm so unhappy with the way I look, like, fuck me.
Yeah.
Like, this is, just be like, no, do you know what? I want to just take care of myself because I just want to be healthy. Mm-hmm. Then all the things will fall into place.
Totally. Like, and that's so important. That's so important. And that's, I think, the polar opposite of the reasoning behind a lot of people's showing up at the gym every day, you know? And it's the exact same podcast that I mentioned earlier that I was listening to. The guest mentioned, like, she's like, you know, she's like, I like the way my body looks. I like the way my body looks. And for a long time, once I got into this whole, you know, binge eating cycle, it's like, I didn't like the way my body looked. But she was saying that she's like, I like the way my body looks every day. But she's like, and I like my body. And she's like, I look in the mirror and I don't think, damn, you know, like, hell yeah, look at that, you know? She's like, I look in the mirror and I think, you know what? Hell yeah, like, good for you for carrying me in and out of my, like, daily routine, for doing my things, going to the gym, how, like, you know, getting groceries, like, just getting up in the morning. She's like, I respect and appreciate my body for carrying me through each and every single day. She's like, it has nothing to do with the physical form of it for me anymore. It's all about just, like, I respect my body for doing it.
That, doing like, it. Mind-body connection.
Yeah.
It's so weird because that connection between the choices you make mentally and then physically put in your mouth, or whatever relationship it is with food, your body is a reflection of your choices oftentimes. I know there's outliers, thyroid, whatever. Yeah. I don't want to count those people out. But it's literally a reflection of, like, do you give a shit or not? Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad by any means.
No, like, no, I don't see it
literally,
as
that. There's facts and there's feelings.
Yeah.
And then there's also my personal story, in fact, that I did it. And so did you. Like, you got out of that cycle and now your life has improved greatly. You just, I imagine it's improved greatly, and your relationship with food is that much better. And oh yeah, this is what I was thinking earlier when you were talking about patterns and breaking out of it. Mm-hmm. Is the education, or not educational? Sorry, what's it called? Your fitness classes in high school, like growing up.
Like GE, like gym class.
I'm drawing a blank. PE.
Oh,
yeah.
GE.
Physical education. Freaking brain fart. It happens. Okay, so PE growing up.
GE.
Everyone has always, at least in my upbringing, it was always a shitty thing to do. People were dreading having to go run a mile because it was hard. Mm-hmm. People have this relationship with physical education. And then, you had jocks and athletes who, there's even a subculture there that you're judged if you're a PE student and not an athlete student. But it just triggered in my mind earlier because I'm like, wait, this relationship, we have a system where we're supposed to coach the youth in exercising.
Right.
But people dread it. And this is another fact maybe that we can't hide from is, are we asking something that is impossible necessarily because we've reached this state of comfort to where that tribe that looks shredded, looks super healthy, that indigenous tribe, that's because they live a life of struggle. Right. Now that we live a life of abundance,
totally,
and it's everything could just be given to you, or you could just drive down the street and go load up on a bomb-ass burger.
Right.
Is it a losing battle because we have these systems where we're trying to teach the youth to care about themselves, but for one, they don't like it, and I think it's because people avoid doing hard things.
Well, I think
they don't want to push themselves.
I think also when you're a kid, obviously, like, I can't speak for the kids that, I know that there are tons of kids with body issues that start fucking young, like kids with body issues that start when they're like 10, 11, and 12. Like, that's so hard. And unfortunately that I can't speak to that.
You mean like obese kids, like getting fed too much?
Yeah. But I mean, for the average weight kid that's running around in 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, you know, it's like gym class is either like a free for all and you're just fucking around with your friends, or it is a pain in the ass because I feel like kids are too young at that point to really understand the way that nutrition and exercise affects your body going forward. I mean, they can be taught. Absolutely, they can be taught, and like that knowledge is out there, but I don't think it's not a priority. And
yeah, especially if their family unit too is not teaching them healthy habits.
Totally, and like kids
losing battle
don't need to worry about that stuff because they're young and they can have fun. You know,
like metabolism's fine.
Yeah, they're good to go. So I mean, I don't think that really particularly affects a lot of kids. So it's just seen as either like, oh my god, I hate gym class, or like, hell yeah, like this is fun. We get to move around and it's a free period essentially. I mean, that's what it was always like for me. It was like we just go fuck around in our ugly uniform shorts and just like have fun. So I mean, it was never, you know, I never dreaded it, but I'm sure for kids that do, it's just because, you know, that you don't really have that relationship yet.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a losing battle though, because I think what needs to be pushed going forward more or less is just for, you know, young adults, you know, older adults too, is that it's like, you know, this whole fitness thing is a long haul. You're in it for yourself, and it's not about the way you look. It's about the way you take care of yourself. You know, it's like,
exactly, the looks and after effect of your choices.
Right. Because so for instance, when I first started getting really interested in fitness and nutrition, and I am in no way shitting on any of these like fitness accounts because I think they're great to get people motivated and interested in doing, you know, unique different kinds of programs. But I think the kinds of workouts where it's, you know, like hopping around on a mat and like doing, you know, like little weights and no, like little, like I always think they're like bunny rabbits, like little bunny rabbit workouts.
Yeah.
It's like those I find unfortunately are usually targeting looks, because you have this hot fitness chick who's like in a bra and leggings. She's like, you know, doing weights. And it's like, oh man, you know, I want to look like her. I want to look like that. And I want to, you know, so that's what I have to do to look like that. And so I think that fuels a lot of people's intention when it comes to doing those kinds of workouts. Meanwhile, in reality, no one's going to look like that except for the other select few people that have similar genetics, or, you know, are already at a baseline fitness where they're going to be predisposed to develop that sort of physique. Or you might look better. You're going to look better anyway because you're yourself, and, you know, just like do your thing. But I feel like a lot of those kinds of accounts, unfortunately, and I'm speaking purely to social media, continue to fuel people to focus fitness on looking a certain way. Whereas I was initially following those kinds of accounts when I first got really interested in fitness and nutrition. And now I follow like top athletes that just look like bros, like hell yeah. Like you're doing your sport, you're killer at your sport. And I now follow a bunch of different, I don't want to call them like eating disorder accounts, but more or less like influencer accounts that are based on like body positivity, in the sense of like they're posting pictures of themselves with like their stomachs out, and then like the comparison between like posing and not posing to show like this isn't really what people look like all the time, you know, and like this is what we look like when we're sitting around watching a movie and chilling. So I don't know. I don't think it's a lost cause. I think what just needs to be shifted is the intention behind fitness.
For sure, I agree. Flipping the script rather, where it's not about looking like that person necessarily, even 100%. Though, I mean, sex sells, and we have all these visual cues. We all have these little phones with incredible screens, and we could see abs and definition, and people are filtered and all this stuff, but just focus on the nutrition and being a healthy person, and the looks will come. You know, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. It takes hard work too. It takes discipline.
So much time, for sure.
Because I do agree with you though, that it's not a lost cause. I think we're heading in the right direction. And I know we live kind of in this little bubble to where it's a higher economic area in Orange County, and people have better resources, and you go to certain parts of the country and you look around and you're like, oh my God, there's so many people that are overweight. And
there's such a difference, you know. It's like there's such a difference between, like, even where I'm from. I mean, in York, Pennsylvania, there's just a ton of dear souls, like dear soul people. And then it's like being in Boulder, having spent 4 years in Boulder. It's like you have fucking insane athletes that are just like everywhere all the time, and everyone's on a juice cleanse, or, you know, like trying to just eat turmeric for the rest of their lives. And, you know, it's like there's the polar opposites, and they are everywhere in our country. And, you know, it's like I think it's once again about finding that balance between the two.
For sure.
Because the person who is overweight and isn't used to working out doesn't need to go to the juice cleanse life, you know, in order to solve their problems. You know, it's like, it's about finding what's sustainable, finding what gets them motivated, and hopefully that doesn't include having a six-pack in a month, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well said. So what advice would you have for a young girl or boy out there to kind of nip in the butt what you started and struggled with for a couple years there?
Yeah.
I mean, you've already touched on it a little bit, but
I think if I had been told from the get-go that this is a thing and not something to hate myself for, and that someone, like, other people are 100% experiencing what I'm experiencing, because you feel so alone in those moments, especially when I didn't know that, like, that it was actually a thing, you know, that binge eating was a thing. And I was like, you know what, there's something wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. And I felt really, really alone. And I jumped back and forth between, like, maybe being paleo would solve my problems, maybe being keto would solve my problems. And so, like, I tried all of these things, and it's like, it was all just part of the process. And I honestly think just like knowing that, as cliche as it sounds, like you're really not alone. As soon as I started that program, and even just the Facebook group, reading that so many people were experiencing pretty much the exact same thing that I was, like I said, was so moving and so important. And also, don't hide these things. Don't hide them, because more than likely you're going to find somebody else that's experiencing the same thing, and you can work together to fight it. You know, like, since I've shared this part of my life with some people in my life, it's like I've had a surprising number of them be like, oh my God, like, I've done that before too. Like, I ate a whole bag of Doritos the other night. And, like, oh my God. And it's like, okay, you know, like, it's all about the self-loathing that comes from it, that I think distinguishes what an actual eating disorder becomes. But regardless, no matter how you're feeling, someone out there is feeling the exact same way as you, so you're not alone. And I really just think, like, looking for that balance, looking for the balance that we've talked about so many times. You know, it's like, you have to find what motivates you, and what interests you, and just be careful of that threshold. Because, I mean, my innocent interest in nutrition and fitness is like, I had a very innocent interest in it, and it became something that if I had seen the red flags, you know, I might have been able to put a stop on earlier. But
makes sense. You're not alone out there.
Yeah.
Well said, and thank you for sharing your story, because I want people to take care of themselves. And if you love life, and if you want to see your grandkids and great-grandkids and just feel good and be productive, be a productive member in society, you got to take care of yourself first. And there's all these problems in the world and in our society, and I think a lot of them would be solved they would help be solved if people just started caring about themselves first, their physical and mental health, and then start tackling bigger issues. And and we're all in this together. If you're out there, you're not alone.
No shame.
Develop a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
And reach out if you ever have any questions or need help. I'm no expert by any means, but I do know quite a bit, and so do you.
I was literally just going to say, like, I don't know if like in the show notes or whatever, if you want to include my Instagram handle, I am always open to talking to people about this, because if they just want some advice, if they want to vent, if they, like it helped me, like I've said so many times, it helped me so much just to know that someone else was there, someone else felt it, someone else was dealing with it. And I am always down to talk to people about it.
Amazing. And we didn't even touch on your artwork. Well, maybe I have to do another episode about that. But if you, what's your Instagram?
For my art, it's just Erin Holberg art.
Incredible pieces. Guys, honestly, like, check it out. She is so talented. It's incredible.
Thank you.
But thank you again for coming on.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Good. I think it's amazing that you came on the other side and we were able to have this conversation. Yeah. I used to be freaking super huge, and you had an unhealthy relationship with food, and
so many people
we're in a different place now.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, you guys, talking goes a long way, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.